the Angel Reese special at McDonald's now. Let's break it down. My favorite barbecue sauce, American cheese, crispy bacon, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun, of course. And don't forget the fries and a drink. Sound good? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating restaurants for a limited time.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Hey, I'm Candice Lim.
And I'm Lindsay. And you're listening to ICYMI.
In case you missed it.
Slate's podcast about internet culture. And Candice, I want to share with you my new least favorite genre of TikTok.
Ooh, I want to hear more.
So these videos, they're ads on TikTok, but they're styled like regular TikTok videos. But they're from brands like Talkiatry or Nourish, and they're all meant to look like it's a regular person posting, but it's coming from a brand account. And so it'll say things like, POV, you just found out there's a virtual dietitian or psychologist who takes your insurance, and it's this woman walking around like the music is soothing. She's like kicking leaves. I hate it. I hate them so much.
I've kind of seen these before, and I always hit like not interested, but guess what? They come back. They always come back.
Well, yeah. And the problem is, and this is where I do it to myself, where I see something like this, I'm grossed out about it, and I'm like, well, let's cover it. And so then I end up engaging with them more. And so now it's my entire feed, which is really annoying because I already find the whole concept of advertising for-profit healthcare just really gross. But something about this feels extra sinister because it's sort of being Trojan horsed in front of us as if it's like lifestyle content.
That makes a lot of sense. And the thing is, I'm immediately thinking of the Hims and Hers Super Bowl ad.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yes, that was, I know I said that no one cared about any of the ads, but when that ad finished and we realized it was for Hims and Hers, there was like a full groan throughout the room.
I know. And for those who are free from capitalism, first off, I'm jealous. Second, Hims and Hers Health is this direct-to-consumer prescription and over-the-counter medication company. They also claim to be doing some telehealth stuff. And basically, they pair you with a healthcare professional who, via consultation, can write you a prescription and get it sent to your house. And the controversial Super Bowl ad we're talking about, it was for their GLP-1 medication, which is an injectable weight loss medication. It's their Ozempic. And it got a lot of bad press because it was accused of being misleading.
Yeah, I saw, it begins talking about a sort of larger epidemic of health in America, but particularly obesity. And so people on TikTok, they were saying it was fat shaming, that it was trying to convince customers that this medication was life-changing. But there also weren't any postscript messages about like side effects because I guess the FDA didn't require a warning in this commercial.
Yeah. For me, my gripe is that it also used Donald Glover's song, This Is America, which is literally a song about how messed up America is. And it almost felt like Hims and Hers used that song and they were trying to say like, yeah, America is bad. Therefore, we're going to fix it with GLP-1 weight loss medication. And it's just like, like that is so messy and also not a good ad nor storytelling period.
Yeah, it's like if you believe it, you just buy one more product and then that'll fix America. But even if you haven't seen this ad, there's a good chance you've probably seen a Hims or Hers ad because they cover a ton of different things. They cover issues like hair loss, erectile dysfunction, birth control, weight loss. These issues aren't necessarily taboo, but I don't know, they're ones they're talked about with a little bit of discretion. But Hims and Hers aren't the only company in this space. We're talking about more than just them today. They're just like pretty emblematic of this larger trend online.
Yeah, and Hims and Hers ads, they're so noticeable because they honestly market themselves like gummy bear vitamins. There's bright colors, the fonts are very soft, and then they'll kind of be like, oh, take these pills to get your mojo back. And you're like, whoa, I did not need to know you like that. Whoa.
Well, yeah, it feels like the same way Elon Musk wants X to be like the everything app. I get this impression from Hims and Hers. It feels like it wants to be sort of like the everything, I don't know, pill. It's like this buffet of pharmacy that you can go to any issue you have, you can go to them. And the Super Bowl ad was like, we're all sick and America is keeping us sick for profit. And, you know, you hear that and you're like, yeah, Luigi. And then it's like, so get your healthcare from another private healthcare provider. But it's like different because we use pastel colors. And so it's just, I don't know, it's like fighting fire with fire, in my opinion.
And to your point, this is not just happening in TV ads. You know, ads for these online companies, they are all over Instagram. There's banner ads. I see them at bus stops.
Yeah, they're all over the subway cars in New York. It reminds me of, I feel like the sort of millennial version of this are those doctor's offices that are like Tend and Tia, where they're made to look really Instagrammable and modern. The Gen Z version of that is like similar branding, but it's all online, like Hims and Hers.
Yeah. And Kate, I have a question for you. Do you think RFK Jr. has used Hims?
If he has, he is a horrible walking advertisement for it.
Because I'm not going to lie, now that RFK Jr. is indeed the Secretary of Health and Human Services, I sometimes get a little worried that he's, you know, not only openly anti-vaccine, but also that he is going to let a lot of like Hims-coded companies just start flooding the market without an FDA who is properly staffed to like go through the right procedures.
You would think that he would be against something like this, because I feel like another one of his key talking points is that America is over-medicated, but also like the foundation of his beliefs in general is already so shaky. And so, yeah, there's just no way of knowing what havoc he might wreak.
I know, like, instead of free COVID tests, is it like free ED pills to each household of 4? I don't know. I'm scared. I don't know.
I'm surprised that hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
I know.
I mean, especially online, all these healthcare brands with their trendy colors and like these sneaky ads, they purport to make it really easy to solve all your healthcare problems without, crucially, ever going to an actual doctor. It's all happening online. So it kind of begs the question, is this a scam?
And if so, will anyone stop us from becoming an over-medicated, chronically online consumer? I'd love to know, but first, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to chat with NPR pharmaceuticals correspondent Sydney Lufkin about how online healthcare has turned us from patients to customers. And later, we're going to get her advice on how to responsibly interact with healthcare products online.
Oh, ICYMI listeners, do I have a scoop for you? So what is it, you ask? It's that Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Now, before anyone goes suggesting that this is just a rumor, know that there's actual proof that this kettle of tea is not only piping hot, but 100% true. So, yeah, sometimes it pays to be a little nosy, but it always pays to discover. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/creditcard.
When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands, then lower cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the U.S. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IP Works Wonders.
Hi, listeners. I hope you're enjoying today's show. If this is your first time listening, then welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. In case you missed it, our show comes out twice a week on Wednesdays and Saturdays, so make sure you never miss an episode, like this past Wednesdays, when we discussed the social media fight between Bon Appetit and everyone's favorite chef in the Hamptons. And we're back. Okay, so Candice and I, if you haven't noticed already, are not medical professionals. And to avoid falling into the same trap of sharing healthcare advice without any qualifications, we wanted to make sure that for this episode, we brought in someone who knows a lot more about how the pharmaceutical industry interacts and intersects with platforms like TikTok.
That's right. So we are so excited to welcome to the show NPR pharmaceuticals correspondent Sydney Lufkin. Hello, Sydney.
Hey, guys.
Oh my gosh, so exciting to have you here during this crazy time for, I'm sure, the area you cover. But before we get into all that, this is the question we ask anyone who's new to the show. What is your first internet memory?
So that's a great question because I feel like as an elder millennial, I did not, like, everybody around me was getting those AOL discs in the mail.
Sure.
Do you guys remember these?
Yeah.
But, like, we were not fancy, so we didn't have AOL. Actually, we didn't have a computer until, I think, later, like, in our neighborhood. I had like a b2000.net email address. Like I was not Sydney Lupkin at AOL.com. That was not a thing. We didn't have AOL. So yeah, I don't know. My first internet memory was probably just trying to like suddenly having an email address and not knowing how to type it because it was like B-2000 or B_2000. It was discount internet.
Yeah.
In like, I don't know, 1998. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm just like thinking of, I feel like for elder millennials and, you know, like getting handed an email address was like the first entry point. And it's like, with whom were we corresponding with at that age? Like, who was I emailing? I know I used to have like a code.
I was emailing no one.
Yeah, I had a code with my friend where we would email each other. And then it was like, if we were sending an email and one of our parents walked in to the room, the code to like, I guess, let them know that had happened and get the email off the screen was like, I think we like had to just type like F or something and then send it. And if we saw an email abruptly end with F, that was like, parent walked in, gotta send it.
Were you not supposed to be using email?
Well, that's, as I'm saying it, I guess it was the idea that we would be having a lot of scandalous stuff to be talking about and that, you know, we didn't want our parents to see.
You're like
it.
11.
Right, we're 11. I'm like, what? Like, it's wild enough that I was emailing anyone, but I had nothing to report other than what they already saw me do at school that day.
Right. We definitely then had like AIM, AOL Instant Messenger, even though we didn't have AOL. But like I have a sibling and we had one computer in the house. So it was like honestly like a, you know, fight over she's on too long. So like a lot of my internet memories are probably like getting my hair pulled by my sister because she wanted to talk to her friends.
Is your sibling older or younger?
2 years younger.
Okay, so were they, because my sister like brings this up all the time, is that kind of the way the hierarchy worked is I would get the computer and she would just have to sit next to me while I played like Sims or whatever, and I wouldn't let her play, but she could watch. And she brings it up to this day as like one of the many ways I've wronged her throughout her life.
No, that was not I think my parents were trying so hard to be like perfectly even and maybe even like a little bit like my sister may disagree with this, but like maybe they overcompensated for my sister as the like littler one to not leave her out. So maybe I was the one who was slighted.
As actually a little sister, I would like to jump into this conversation and talk about another epidemic we're suffering under, which is the Hims and Hers national nightmare. Okay. I think the conversation around Hims and Hers is interesting, but the deal is they're kind of like the obvious villain, right? They are one face of a much bigger market. And so I would love to talk about where else these like direct-to-consumer brands and ads are popping up. Sydney, where do you see them the most? How do they kind of enter your life?
Well, first I want to kind of back up and say I'm not sure that I necessarily see Hims and Hers as a villain. I think that they are a part of the healthcare landscape. And also I do kind of want to say that like, I don't think that they're able to do telehealth and help you with every possible drug. Like I think they're filling a void. But that said, there are a lot of companies that are offering telehealth and their versions of Wegovy, Ozempic, Zepbound, Mounjaro, these drugs that can help you lose weight. And it's a mix. It's really a mix because a lot of them, they didn't exist a couple of years ago, right? Like, where did they come from? And it's hard to know. Is this a legit service that's being offered? Is this, where are they getting their GLP-1? And I think a lot of understanding that is to also sort of understand what they're offering, which is not generic medications. There are brand name drugs. There are generics. There are actually also biosimilars, but we're not going to go there. In this case, they're offering something called compounded medication. And compounding is not new. It has been around for a long time. And basically, the bread and butter of compounding is, let's say I need a medication. Let's say it's for, I don't know, pink eye. It's a horrible example, but we're going to go with it anyway. But I'm allergic to like the preservative in that medication. But the brand name version only has that preservative. So the generic only has that preservative. What do? A compounding pharmacist can make me a version that I am not allergic to. So like it fills that sort of individual patient need. You have a prescription from a doctor for that specific kind of medication that then the specific compounding pharmacist makes for you. And then you're filling that, you know, one patient, one doctor, one prescription, one filled prescription. So I want to say that that has been around for a while. However, there are rules that allow compounders to do something that they're normally not allowed to do, which is make what is, quote, essentially a copy of an existing medication that has been approved by the FDA. And in this case, the exception to that rule is there is a shortage of the brand name product. And because these weight loss drugs have been in such high demand, they've been in and out of shortage for, I don't know, 2.5 years. So because of the shortage, these compounders are legally allowed or had been. Now it's a little bit fuzzier as they come out of shortage. They're allowed to do this. So you found that now there are, you know, businesses filling the gap. Sometimes I hear from patients who are like, well, I have a legit Wegovy prescription, but the shortage means that I haven't reliably been able to fill that prescription. And I'm supposed to take this injection every week. I want to be able to keep doing that. So they will go the compounded route. Other people it's filling kind of a different need, which is that Wegovy and Zepbound are not always covered by insurance and they're very expensive. They're more than $1,000 a month. So if they're not covered by your insurance, you don't have $1,000 a month to spend on them. What do you do? And the answer is, okay, you can get it compounded because they're offering a lower price. And that while that's not supposed to, I always hear from compounders, you know, price isn't supposed to be part of the calculus here. It's not supposed to be part of that, but it is because that's the reality of the price of the drug and the insurance coverage. So all of these sort of factors together create this environment where you definitely have legit compounders who are licensed, who are doing things in a clean and sterile environment. Because remember, you're injecting this stuff. It has to be sterile. Yeah. You don't want it to be made by someone who's not following all of the rules because you could get hurt. But there are also people who are maybe not following all of these rules because there's money to be made. So you got to check. You got to find a way to check. And it can be really hard.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, with it being online and more accessible, it sort of is, obviously it's healthcare, but the way that this more on-demand healthcare has emerged, it gets sort of, to me, it has more of like a wellness vibe to it and a bit more of like I'm doing self-care, I'm shopping type of thing, because that's kind of how they're getting your attention the same way. And I know TikTok is a really big place for this, and it's where I'm seeing all these ads for, you know, like talkiatry or, you know, like a nutritionist, things like that. Because, you know, a TikTok ad could be a more traditional commercial that auto plays when you open the app, or it could be a sponsored video that a creator is posting, or it's boosted by the brand's account. But it also could be something that the creator earns commission on in TikTok Shop, which is the fact that there are sort of healthcare adjacent items available on TikTok Shop is mind blowing to me. And I actually just want to play a little bit of audio of something user at the Tony McClellan found when they searched for this single phrase on TikTok.
My dad is one of the highest paying nutritionists, yet nobody believes him when he says these things.
My dad was the highest paid nutritionist in 2024, and still nobody believes him when he tells them.
My dad is one of the highest paid nutritionists in all of California, yet for some reason, nobody believes him when he says these things.
Sydney, first off, this is TikTok. Have you seen any of these ads or any like initial reactions to what we just showed you?
So I have to also maybe come clean about something. I deleted TikTok because it was making me crazy.
No, see, that's how you know you are serious about health. You said this is bad.
Well, I would just notice that it was taking up more time and it wasn't making me happier. Though at one point when I was in my like capybara TikTok era, it was making me happier. Yeah. But I would say outside of that, that wasn't usually true. But, you know, I have seen ads for some of these companies on like Instagram, Facebook. They come up all over. And is this an issue of these are people who are not disclosing that these are paid ads? Like, what am I supposed to learn from this?
You're like, what am I seeing? So what this is a bunch of different users on TikTok. They're making videos. They all have the same script, like right down to the motions. Like we all heard the audio of them saying, my dad is the highest paid nutritionist and no one listens to him. They're also, all of them are either like cutting fruit or one girl's making slime. Like it's very coordinated. But if you look at the bottom left of all their videos, it says creator earns commission. And basically it links to either a nutritional gummy or this specific beef tallow balm or something like equally random. And it's on TikTok shop. So what happens is if someone buys it using their TikTok shop link, they earn commission off of that purchase. And I will say researching those things has ruined my feed. I am getting every other video is about beef tallow from me now and like how you should put it on your skin or like these weird gummies. And I am owed compensation from my employer, but I will raise that internally.
So funny.
I feel like it's, I might make an influencer decision based on like a cute eyeshadow, but I don't know that I would make a decision based on this, especially these are like supplements. So they're also regulated in like a not super stringent way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I feel like we're kind of ignoring the elephant, which is that not everyone's dad can be the highest paid nutritionist in the state. Okay, there is a ranking.
You guys have to all get in a room and figure out where
Let
your
me see some IRS spreadsheets.
Fall.
Like we need to take this to task. But Kate, the way that beef tallow haunts you, okay? I feel this way about GLP-1 ads. They haunt me so much, and I must bring up the most egregious way this happens to me, which is on Reddit snark pages. Basically, for the past few months, I have been noticing that companies like Hers and Ro and products like Wegovy and Ozempic, they have been advertising on places like NYC Influencer Snark. I sometimes see them on FOMOI. And the reason why I find this a bit atrocious is because one of the biggest convo topics on those subreddits are Ozempic allegations. Like, there's always people being like, did this influencer lose weight? Like, let's say Remy Bader, for example. If so, is she on Ozempic? And the Snark commenters, they'll get in there. They will say nasty things about people using weight loss meds. But then I'll scroll, and then I will see an Ozempic ad. And it's like, wait. So the brands behind those same meds are like advertising those products directly to the audience criticizing them. And to me, it's just kind of dystopian because unfortunately, I wonder if it's kind of genius to like target your haters and convert them into users.
Yeah, well, because like, I don't know, they don't hate this is a whole other conversation. Like they don't hate the weight loss drugs. They just have like a stigma against the use of them. And yeah, that is particularly pernicious. And it's also, this whole thing is a very uniquely American thing because, America does not have universal health care, has for-profit health care and private insurance. But to most people in other countries, this type of stuff is not that normal. There was perhaps no better example of this than back in 2021. Meghan and Harry gave that like tell-all interview to Oprah. Mm-hmm. And I remember I did a free trial of Paramount Plus to watch it. And so did, via VPN, a lot of people in the UK. They wanted to, see what was up. But these viewers were tuning in through an American network. And there was coverage of this. They were shocked at the amount of pharmaceutical commercials. And I looked it up. It's because advertising for pharmaceuticals is illegal in the UK and most everywhere else except for the US and New Zealand randomly.
And this is going to show my age here, but they also weren't legal my whole life. Mm-hmm. I believe it was the early mid 90s and it was Claritin for allergies. That was the first one. And that was a big deal when it happened. Yeah, this is something that it's a very American thing. All that said, I do also kind of want to point out, though, that when I am on Reddit talking to people about weight loss drugs, it is usually it's often about compounding. It's often about how to find it safely. Because, people who are obese do want to lose weight. They do, they want to lower the A1Cs. They're being advertised these things on their television and they're, really frustrated that they can't get insurance coverage or they're frustrated that they can't afford it or they can't find it at their local pharmacy. And the stigma that you were talking about is there for for these drugs in general. I've talked to patients who have told me that they qualified for it, but their doctor shamed them and said, you don't need this. You shouldn't take this. This isn't. And she left crying. I talked to people who haven't told their spouses that they're using these drugs. There's so much to unpack about how people feel about all of this. And it makes it so hard for these patients. And they're just trying to take control of their health. And there are definitely people who are I'm trying to take this to lose 5 pounds. But a lot of people aren't doing that. A lot of people are really trying to take control of their health, and they're having a really hard time finding a safe compounded product, figuring out how they're going to pay for the brand name product. It's kind of, there's a lot going on.
No, yeah. I mean, that's why it is so to hear about ways that it might be happening, I don't know, without the proper regulation and things like that, is that, someone is turning to these not casually. The reason they're going this route is either for affordability or, like you said, if you're allergic to something, you need it compounded, or just shame, where it's oh, I can do this covertly. No one needs to know about it. It happens on my computer. And then to kind of, promise an answer to that shame and then not be following necessarily the correct regulations is just insult to injury.
Yeah, it's really, and the thing is, compounded pharmacies are, we sort of hear, or I think somebody alluded to it earlier, that these aren't FDA approved, and that is true. The original drugs, of course, are FDA approved, but compounded drugs are not. They do not go through the gold standard rigorous clinical trial testing where it's double blind placebo. They're trying to sort of redo that recipe. But then compounding pharmacists are largely regulated on the state level by state boards of pharmacy. So if you are trying to figure out how to do this, it's easy to kind of get lost and say, well, okay, this website looks really shiny. It looks really legit, but it may not be. And there's unfortunately a lot on you, the consumer, to sort of figure that out, because you can't necessarily trust that even a really slick website is going to do that for you. And that means, there are the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy has a little pharmacy checker. That is one thing that you can try, though they can't look at everything. At one point I talked to them months ago and they were new illegitimate pharmacies online crop up all the time. And it's kind of like whack-a-mole.
Yeah. And I think what you're kind of also talking about is the way that Americans have changed their relationship with their doctors, because Reddit is one of those great places for research about anything, really. You can spend hours and hours there looking up which type of medication should I get? Where can I get it from? And then there are scenarios, like you just said, you bring it into a doctor's office and they immediately either shame you or tell you don't do that. I mean, Kate, there was an article you sent me from The Atlantic, right? That kind of talked about this.
Yeah, so it was about Hims and Hers. I think it was pegged to the Super Bowl. It's The Atlantic's writer, John Hendrickson. He wrote about, just how these ads were following him across social media and Subway and all this stuff. And then when he was at the doctor recently, I'll read the excerpt. He says, "In December, after my dermatologist examined my scalp during an annual skin screening, I sheepishly asked her about Hims. She rolled her eyes. After a few minutes of discussion, a topical solution seemed like a better bet than the pill, but there is nothing special about Hims itself." And he's quoting the doctor here. "The doctor said, if you want, I can just call in a minoxidil finasteride solution to your pharmacy. It'll be cheaper. She saw me as her patient, not an e-commerce shopper. Still, the fact that I asked about Hims at all made me feel like the company's pervasive marketing was working on me."
I feel like we have all been a little bit of John before. I mean, I'll expose myself because it is so weird to realize in any part of your life that you've maybe been influenced. I'll give an example. I once went to a physical therapist and I showed him one of those weird neck curve foam things on Amazon. And the second I popped it up, he was like, "Nope, that's dumb. Instead, here are 5 exercises you can do that are free and they work." And he was right. And it's just one of those things of sometimes you do feel stupid bringing things up like this to a real doctor who went to a real medical school versus your TikTok doctor who is hot but a bit unaccredited,
Well, yeah, my version of this is I started dermaplaning, which is taking a razor to your face. because of TikTok. TikTok made me self-conscious about the invisible hairs that are on my face. I was like, oh, I must get rid of them. And I did that. And then I broke out like I've never broken out before in my entire life. And it honestly felt like I was being delivered karma for just like listening to TikTok in the first place. I don't know, Sydney, because you cover this stuff. So maybe you're able to navigate these waters better. But have you ever sort of fallen victim to anything like this?
I'm trying to think. I don't think that I have. I have a close friend who has, and I promise the close friend isn't me. You can believe me or not. And it was like some kind of, she had done some kind of like foam spiky like roller, like almost like a foam roller for muscles, but it was to get rid of cellulite. And she called me crying, and it had like bruised her butt. But I mean, it's important to talk to your doctor. Your doctor went to medical school. Also, you know, it is important to also have a good relationship with your doctor. So if you don't feel comfortable talking to that person, then it's time to find a new one. You should be able to ask embarrassing questions. That's what they're there for. They've definitely seen it all.
Yeah, and I agree with you that, like, ideal situation, you have a doctor you trust, they trust you, and, like, vibes are good. I will admit, though, that I've definitely been in some doctor offices where I did not feel like my care was being first and foremost appreciated or taken care of. And I kind of don't think I'm super alone, because I think there has been this growing, you know, legitimate distrust of the healthcare industry. You know, multiple studies have found that some doctors frequently dismiss female pain. And I could definitely see a younger audience, a female audience, being like, well, if my doctor's not listening to me, why am I listening to them? You know?
Right. There's also, you know, stats like Black Americans experience higher mortality rates than other patients. And, you know, then that's not even getting into the complicated web of filing insurance claims and you know, trusting, does this company want to help me? Do they want my money? And like you mentioned, you then have RFK coming in. He's spewing his own distrust of healthcare and science. And no matter who you support, which side of the aisle you fall on, it feels like these days everyone has a different reason to maybe be skeptical of traditional medicine.
Yeah, it definitely also gets tricky when like your doctor and your insurance company are fighting it out, and you're just sort of stuck, or you're like your insurance company won't cover a drug that your doctor says that you need, and you're like, but this is the doctor. So it's not even a distrust of doctors, it's just the whole system can make you fed up.
Yeah,
exactly. And so we have the system that is almost like speaking a different language than we know how to understand or comprehend. And sometimes I look at places like Hims and Hers and I'm like, okay, you know, maybe these online companies, they are filling a void that could help some people. However, I sometimes wonder if they might also be a part of the problem. You know, is it possible that the ads they put out can rub people the wrong way? And the question is, how can we safely navigate all of this? Because I want to know how to be a better consumer, and I want to ask you more about it, Sydney. But first, let's take a break. When we come back, Sydney will answer our biggest questions about navigating the TikTok pharmacy.
Your data is like gold to hackers. They're selling your passwords, bank details, and private messages. McAfee helps stop them. Secure VPN keeps your online activity private. AI-powered text scam detector spots phishing attempts instantly. And with award-winning antivirus, you get top-tier hacker protection. Plus, you'll get up to $2 million in identity theft coverage, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place for changes big and small. Loud or quiet, find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
At Patron, we craft our tequila using high-quality natural ingredients without additives. No sweeteners, no extracts, no secrets. In fact, Patron's secret ingredient is that we have no secret ingredients. Just 100% additive-free tequila, made with 100% Weber Blue Agave, water, and thyme. Patron, 100% additive-free tequila. Visit patrontequila.com to learn more. The perfect way to enjoy Patron is responsibly. Copyright 2025, imported by Patron Spirits Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Tequila 40% ABV.
And we're back. So, Sydney, you recently wrote a piece for NPR titled "When Online Weight Loss Drugs Are Too Good to Be True." And it's a little bit what we got into earlier. You interviewed people who ran into this issue of these are cheaper alternatives to name brand medication, in this case, weight loss drugs, and they were advertised online. But it turned out the company manufacturing the drug didn't necessarily have the required license or one that ensured the drugs were produced in accordance with safety and potency standards. So maybe just tell us how this could happen or how it did happen.
So this was something where I've been covering this sort of world of online compounded obesity drugs for a while now. And somebody had reached out to me and said, do you know about this thing that's happening? And it was somebody who had used this website, telehealth services called Zappy Health, which has like an app where you can talk to other people while you're losing weight to sort of, do it together and not be alone, which is a great idea. And it was basically on the app that somebody said, hey, the pharmacy that I got my vials from, which as far as I know is pronounced Usha, but they never called me back to confirm. So, but basically they said, there's this complaint in Florida, and they linked it or something on the internet, and it says that they never got a sterile compounding license in the state of Florida. And, like we were talking about sort of before, this is something you inject. It has to be sterile. And then there were other sort of things that the inspectors found. The pharmacy had applied for the sterile compounding license. It already had a regular license. But in the state of Florida, you have to have this separate one. It applied earlier in the year. And when inspectors got there, basically they found out that even though they had never granted this license, people were there compounding these drugs anyway. There were some issues where they, with their refrigeration of drugs that need to be refrigerated and with their record keeping, who they're dispensing to. So ultimately there was this complaint that then got posted in early December, and sometime in December, this person puts it on the app. So everybody's like, oh my goodness, I have vials and they were marked Usha. What does that mean? What do I do? And so I heard from that person, and then I started making phone calls. I heard from a bunch of people, and most of them told me that they didn't know until they paid who the pharmacy was going to be. And usually you should get to choose, and you should get to ask, and you should have the opportunity to talk with a pharmacist. So yeah, then these people basically were panicked, and they weren't sure if they should get a refund, and then they couldn't get a refund, and they weren't sure if they should use these vials. And at the end of all of this, on January 31st, so not even that long ago, the pharmacy in Florida voluntarily relinquished his regular pharmacy license. And patients have these vials. I've talked to people, I'm like, so where are they? They're like, they're in my fridge. I'm not using them. Even though we're sort of talking about how these are cheaper alternatives, it's still not cheap. Right. This is still a lot of money. So people were telling me they bought, a 3-month supply of tirzepatide is the name of basically the active ingredient of Zepbound, and that is the Eli Lilly version of these drugs. And because that drug was supposed to go off the shortage list. Remember how we talked about how compounding pharmacies are allowed to make what are essentially copies during a drug shortage. Well, if the drug is no longer in shortage, you're no longer allowed to do that. So people sort of fearing that this was going to come off the shortage list were like, well, I want to buy a stockpile. So which also compounding pharmacists now tell me, don't do that. There are expiration dates. They're not called expiration dates. They have another term. They're called beyond use dates. Basically, you want to make sure that this is still safe, but people were buying 3, 6, and 9 month supplies. And that's costing them I've heard people say they spent $1,000. I've heard people say they spent $3,000. And now they have product that like, you could use it. You could roll the dice and use it. It's not clear that it's going to be tirzepatide. It's not clear that it's not going to hurt you or make you sick, or, you know, even if it's not, let's say it's not contaminated, the other risk is it might be not potent enough. It might not work, or it might be too potent. You might wind up in the emergency room having basically overdosed. And that's how it happened.
Yeah.
That's sort of led me to the reporting and where we are now.
Yeah. And I'm willing to bet that this is like one case, one example of other medications that are kind of undergoing this similar questionable practice. I mean, the only reason that these Ozempic copycat brands existed in the first place is because, as you wrote, the FDA allows this kind of compounding during drug shortages. And so a huge part of this industry is excused by a technicality. And it feels like similar loopholes must have allowed the online healthcare industry to get as big as it has. And
you would think.
It's hard to know.
You would think.
Yeah, you would think.
But actually, like, drug shortages, there's a lot of drug shortages all the time. And most of them, though, are not brand name shortages. Most of them are not new drugs and shortages. They're actually like old drugs that are generic. So there's a lot of competition, and they're often sterile injectables used in hospitals for things like chemotherapy. There was a big chemotherapy shortage. And you don't see a ton of like widespread online or
Right.
another example is ADHD drugs
Right.
shortage.
Yeah.
But you're not seeing a ton of compounded ADHD drugs. Like, this actually in many ways is kind of unique to the obesity drug space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you know, kind of stepping back for a second, I love this conversation we're having with you, Sydney, because I'm learning so much. I'm not going to lie, though. I know for a fact I'm going to get off this call. I'm going to go on TikTok, and I know I'm going to see an ad for beef tallow that I absolutely did not ask for. And it's kind of making me think more and more about, like, how hard it is to know what to trust. And so I was wondering if we could, like, ask you some questions about, like, how to more mindfully navigate this landscape.
Yes. And at the end, I would like to ask you what beef tallow is. But go on.
Well, first and foremost, I looked this up after being advertised it relentlessly. Beef tallow is basically like a fat, like it's a beef fat that you're putting on your face that allegedly can help with acne, but also like all this other stuff. It's just like the new trendy thing that people are putting on their face that I'm hopeful.
Seems like it would give you acne.
Right, exactly.
I know,
So
I
I will
know.
not be going anywhere near it despite how many people's top paid nutritionist dads are recommending it to me. But on that note, like, here's the thing, like, unless they really do all of the same highest paid nutritionist dad, like, maybe it's not multiple dads, maybe it's one dad and a ton of kids. But barring that, they're just, whatever the script is a lie. And I'm thinking about how, like, you know, on TV ads for pharmaceuticals, often they'll say, like, this person is an actor, they're not a real patient or whatever. They also have to disclose side effects. But I'm seeing, you know, these ads on TikTok, they don't have to say it's an actor, or they don't say it's an actor, and they don't disclose side effects. Do you know why online it feels like you can get away with saying less or being a little bit more opaque about a bit of healthcare that you kind of can't get away with on TV?
Honestly, I have to tell you the answer is that I don't know. I would love to know more. I do think that sometimes if they're not advertising a specific product, like, for instance, the Hims and Hers ad technically wasn't for a specific product. And that could be like a way that you don't have to do that. There actually are ads that are on TV that are pharma ads that are reminder ads. And you're just kind of reminding people that there's a condition that is out there, that maybe they have that.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting way around it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we want to be smart consumers. We don't want to be taking, neck foam rollers to our physical therapists, like, offices and trying to, like, talk to them about it. But I wanted to ask, is it as black and white as, like, you should never buy healthcare online? Or are there products that, like, you would buy or maybe, like, wouldn't buy online?
I don't think it's necessarily black and white. I think that you absolutely need to do things like, if they're not asking for a prescription, that's a huge red flag. Don't do that. You can use various tools to verify their license. And then if it's a compounded drug, because, you know, compounding pharmacies rather, are regulated on the state level. So you want to also make sure anytime a compounding pharmacy is sending something to you, it also has to be licensed in your state. And that's something that you should be able to check. That's like not super overwhelming, but also like you can just pick up the phone and ask. And you should, if you want to go a step further, honestly, if I would say that you should also ask the pharmacy, like, where are you getting your ingredients? And then you can actually search the FDA's list of registered drug manufacturers and make sure that they are listed. And then you can even like go totally nuts and look up their inspection record because that exists. Like, I mean, I would do all of those things. Those seem like a good idea to do, but you should absolutely 100%, without a doubt, always be talking to your doctor that you physically see about those decisions. I would say talk about them before you make those decisions and before you make those purchases. And then the other thing to know is that, like, if let's say you're on other medications and you are someone who's lost a lot of weight on one of these, your dosage of your other perhaps weight-based medications might change, because then those medications could harm you because you might be taking too much. So you need to make sure that your doctor is in the loop from the very beginning. And if you don't have a good relationship with your doctor, it's time to find a new doctor.
Yeah. And you mentioned some of these tactics already, but what is some of, like, if you were to, like, you see an ad, you're like, oh, this looks interesting, I'm interested in trying out what they're advertising. What is some fact checking you can kind of do there and then before, like, you know, let's say you're going to talk to your doctor. What are some other additional things you can do to sort of make sure the company, the product is legit?
I mean, you can search for lawsuits. You can search for, I mean, you can just do reporting. You can like put on a reporter hat for a minute. You can look for lawsuits. You can look for business licenses. You can, I mean, I always like to check Better Business Bureau for, you know, let's say there's a problem and people don't get their money back. That's not even something that you would just want to do for a healthcare company. That's something, if I buy a bathing suit from an online manufacturer or from an online company, I want to know if I don't get that bathing suit, if I'm going to get a refund. Like, these are just sort of basic, like, consumer things that you can do for yourself. So if you're going to do that for a bathing suit, you should definitely do that for healthcare, if you are buying healthcare something online. And honestly, the truth is you might not even need to go the online route. They might say, actually, like, I have a compounding pharmacist that can make this for you, and they're down the street, and I've been working with them for 20 years. Wouldn't that be great? And that exists. So there are definitely other options.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I think, like, a red flag was, oh, if they say you don't need a prescription. Are there any other, like, red flags that come to mind?
Yeah, red flags. If they don't ask for a prescription, that's a red flag. If they don't offer you a pharmacist for, like, patient counseling, they're supposed to do that. You're supposed to be able to ask a pharmacist questions. That's a red flag. If the price is too low, ask why. That could be a red flag, I've been told. If you don't see a license when you search for it, that's a red flag. And if you see if you do search the license and you find it, but there's some kind of disciplinary action there, red flag.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, when we're talking about getting access to medication online, and there's just so many questions that we're kind of asking you, I think it's because a question I have sometimes is just like, how regulated or non-regulated are these spaces that I am interacting with? And so I kind of wanted to ask, in like all of your years of reporting on pharmaceuticals and the industry, where do you often see like the responsibility lie? Like, do you think as consumers, if we are kind of upset about the care we're not getting or the price the price being too out of reach for us, do you feel like we should be upset at the government, at TikTok for even letting them market it to us, at insurance companies, all of them?
Who do we yell at, Sydney?
I mean, you can scream into the void.
Oh, yeah, perfect.
No,
The void.
I think that when it comes to all of this, we have a very complicated healthcare system. We have your drug manufacturer. We have your health insurance. We have something in between called a pharmacy benefit manager that makes a menu of drugs that your health insurance will pay for and sets it on like a tiered menu. So some stuff is going to be no copay and some stuff is going to be a really cheap copay, and other stuff they're not even going to cover. And you have to get, you know, additional paperwork. Even if your doctor says, no, this is the drug for her, you might have to jump through hoops for that. The short answer is US healthcare is really complicated. And I'm not sure who to yell at.
Yeah.
I like the answer being the void. I think we all have a void we can yell at.
Or doing like, maybe we do a reverse Meghan and Harry, guys. We move to London and we kind of like do our pod from there, learn about their healthcare system. That's an episode.
Yeah, no problems over there at all for sure.
Okay, that's the show. We'll be back in your feed on Wednesday, so definitely subscribe. That way, you never miss an episode. Leave us a rating and a review in Apple or Spotify, and tell your friends about us. You can follow us on Twitter at ICYMI_pod, and you can always drop us a note at ICYMI@slate.com.
ICYMI is produced by Alexandra Botti, Candice Lim, and me, Kate Lindsay. Daisy Rosario is our senior supervising producer, and Hillary Fry is Slate's editor-in-chief. See you online.
Or at the highest paid nutritionist office.
Who just happens to be my dad.
Mm-hmm.